State of Texas versus Andrea Pia Yates. We, the jury, find the defendant, Andrea Pia Yates, guilty of capital murder as charged in the indictment.
Welcome back. On June 20th, 2001, Andrea Yates systematically drowned her 5 children in a bathtub. A jury didn't buy an insanity defense and found her guilty of murder. She was given a life sentence. But will newly revealed information lead to a new trial? We're joined by journalist Suzanne O'Malley, who's had extensive contact with Yates and has written Are You There Alone? The Unspeakable Crime of Andrea Yates. Susan, can you tell me, why would you write a book? What's your interest in a woman who, drowns, I mean, it's unbelievable, drowns 5 of her children?
All right. John, it was impossible for me not to write the book. When I got to the end of the trial, there was so much information that was not public because of a gag order that was later determined to be unconstitutional. And also because there was just so much that did not come out at trial, it was a story that needed to be told.
Well, did you feel there was not justice carried out in this case? I mean, something compelled you to want to tell this story.
Yeah, it's a human mystery. I just wanted to do something rigorously honest and rigorously human. And the biggest thing that came out for me was that Rusty Yates, whom I had come down to Houston to crucify, the husband of Andrea Yates, figuring he was responsible for all this. And when I read 2,000 pages of medical records, I found nurses reporting that he was, in fact, showing up for his wife. He never deserted her. He visited every day. He fed her Ensure from a straw. He's the only one she would eat from. It was kind of remarkable, and sort of turned my head around. If this could happen to Andrea Yates's family, the Kennedys, and to her, it could happen to anybody.
Well, let me ask you about this appeal. Now, they're trying to say they didn't get a fair trial or they want a new trial. What's at the heart of this matter? It's pretty clear what happened in that case.
Right. What happened toward the end of the trial, and I was in the middle of this, I also write for the television series Law and Order. And one of the expert witnesses for the prosecution happened to be a consultant to Law and Order, and he testified that there was an episode of Law and Order that might have been laid the framework for Andrea Yates's crime. In other words, given her motive or an idea for the crime. I had a pretty good idea that show there was no such Law and Order. And I checked it out with the producers, and in fact, I was right. So ultimately, that expert had to recant his testimony. Unfortunately, it came too late for the guilt or innocence portion of the trial, but it came in time for the sentencing. The prosecutors moved back from asking for the death penalty to letting the jury know that a life sentence would be fine with them.
But at the heart of this matter is the jury had to, at the beginning, determine whether this woman knew it was a crime to drown her 5 kids. They tried an insanity defense, and it was rejected. So I don't understand why then we come back on appeal because somebody said, well, she might have done this because she saw a television show. I don't think that sounds like a very strong case for appeal. What are you hearing? What's the strength of this?
Well, there aren't, no insanity defense has a very strong chance of winning, period. And in the first appeals court here in Texas, it's hard to win an appeal.
Yeah, but you have to show, but when you say it's hard to win an insanity case, yeah, you have to show that when you committed the crime, you didn't know it was wrong.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
How else would you do it? I mean, that's the way you ought to do it. If you knew what you were doing was wrong, you shouldn't get an insanity plea, correct? Especially in a case like this.
Well, there's a catch-22 here, John.
Yeah.
Andrea Yates's particular psychosis. There's, one of the many expert witnesses testified that she was one of the 5 sickest patients that she'd ever treated, and this doctor had treated 6,000 patients. No psychiatrist, whether testifying for the defense or the prosecution, said anything but that this woman was terribly, terribly sick. So there's no doubt about that, no doubt that she was out of her mind. It happens that her delusion, and as part of her craziness, was that she thought that the children could only get to heaven if she killed them in their innocence before the age of 7, and they got to go to heaven. And she, in her delusion, knew it was wrong. So if you ask her, or what, do you see what I mean?
But I think that's, we're almost out of time, Susan, but I think that's what the jury came down to. The question now is going to be, was there some misinformation or whatever that would have led the jury to make a decision they otherwise would not have? I think once they decided insanity was not the plea here, I think it's over, but we're going to have to follow the case because, you know, I didn't think Hinckley was going to get out on weekend visits, and I was wrong about that.
You're wrong about that?
Yeah.
Listen, John, before you go.
Go ahead.
The Yates Kids Memorial Fund is a really great help to educating people about mental health, and you can get a link there at www.suzanneomalley.com.
I'm glad you're doing that. We got a long way to go on mental illness, no question about it. I want to thank you for your book. Thank you for being with us. We've got to run. The outrage of the week is okay. The outrage of the week is next. It's soup. That's right, a bowl of soup. And when you hear this one, you're